She thought it was just another flight, her private jet, her rules, her power. But the moment a smug CEO boarded uninvited, everything changed. He wasn't just arrogant, he was ruthless, treating her sanctuary like his empire. Tension boiled. Midair until the unthinkable happened. She slapped him, right across the face in front of everyone. The cameras caught it, the crew froze, and for a split second, she felt victorious. But little did she know, that single slap would ignite a storm of revenge so calculated, so devastating, that it would shake the foundations of everything she owned. This wasn't just payback, it was a war at 40,000 feet. The world knew Amelia Grant as a symbol of elegance, authority, and untouchable power. At just 35, she had built an empire in the luxury aviation industry, catering to the richest of the rich. Celebrities, royals, politicians, all trusted her private jet service, Skylux Elite. To the world, Amelia was poised and graceful, an icon of sophistication. But behind that calm exterior lived a woman who had fought tooth and nail to carve out her place in a world dominated by men who never believed she belonged. Every morning she reminded herself why she worked so hard. Power wasn't given, it was taken. Her journey from a modest background to becoming the owner of the most exclusive aviation brand wasn't just a success story. It was a declaration. She had spent years being underestimated, dismissed in boardrooms, and mocked for her ambition. But now, the same people who once doubted her lined up for a chance to shake her hand. Her private jet wasn't just a mode of travel, it was her sanctuary. A floating palace where no one dared to challenge her. Every inch of it reflected her personality, sleek interiors, champagne-colored leather seats, a private suite with a panoramic view of the clouds. It was her escape from the noise, a place where she could breathe, plan, and strategize without the constant chaos of corporate wars. But the thing about power is that it doesn't just attract admiration, it breeds enemies. And Amelia had plenty. Rivals from other luxury brands, bitter ex-partners in failed ventures, even former employees who believed they deserved more than she gave them. She kept her circle tight and her walls higher. Trust, for her, was a luxury she could never afford. That morning started like any other. Amelia was scheduled to fly from New York to Geneva for a high-profile aviation summit. It wasn't just another event. It was where the biggest deals were made, where billion-dollar contracts changed hands. Amelia had her speech prepared, her appearance flawless, and her team briefed. The summit was her battlefield, and she intended to win. Her jet gleamed under the soft morning light as she arrived on the private tarmac. The crew lined up to greet her, their uniforms immaculate. She stepped onto the stairs, the wind tugging gently at her designer coat, her heels clicking against the polished metal steps. Inside, everything was perfect, just as she liked it. A glass of sparkling water waited on the table beside her favorite seat. The latest issue of a luxury lifestyle magazine lay neatly folded, featuring her on the cover. She smiled slightly. Control. That's what she thrived on. As the engines roared to life, Amelia glanced at her itinerary. Everything was on schedule. She leaned back, closed her eyes for a moment, and let the hum of the jet soothe her. For someone who lived in constant motion, this was peace, rare, fleeting, and entirely hers. Or so she thought. It started with a minor detail, one that didn't seem important at first. A message from her assistant flashed across her phone. "Mr. Steele confirmed. Will board shortly." Her brows furrowed. Mr. Steele? She hadn't approved any additional passengers. Her flights were strictly private and no one, not even her closest associates, boarded without her consent. She typed back quickly, demanding an explanation, but before she could hit send, the door opened, and then he walked in. Dominic Steele, CEO of Titan Corp, a global tech giant with more scandals than Amelia could count. He was the kind of man tabloids loved, handsome, arrogant, with a reputation for crushing anyone who stood in his way. He didn't just break rules, he rewrote them for his convenience. The press called him ruthless. Amelia called him dangerous. Their paths had crossed before, at events, in negotiations, during high-stakes meetings where Titan Corp considered investing in luxury aviation. Dominic had once proposed a partnership, but Amelia had turned him down without hesitation. His terms were predatory, his tone patronizing. And when she refused, he smiled that infuriating smile, the one that said he wasn't used to losing. Now, here he was, standing in the aisle of her jet as if he owned it. Dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, his presence filled the cabin like a storm cloud. His eyes met hers, sharp and unyielding, with a hint of amusement, as though this was all some elaborate joke only he understood. "Amelia," he greeted, smoothly, his voice deep and confident. Amelia didn't move. Her grip on the armrest tightened, but her face remained composed. Years in the corporate battlefield had taught her one thing: never let them see you flinch. Without a word, she signaled for her chief flight attendant. The young woman rushed over, clearly nervous. Amelia's voice was calm, but there was steel in it as she asked why Dominic Steele was on her plane. The attendant stammered something about last-minute arrangements, an urgent business discussion, and clearance from Amelia's assistant. Her assistant, loyal, efficient, and terrified of. Making mistakes had been played. Dominic knew exactly how to manipulate his way in, and now he was here, mid-flight imminent, and the rules of her sanctuary had been shattered. Amelia considered her options. She could demand that he leave immediately, but that would delay her schedule. She could call security, but the damage, the humiliation, would linger. No, she decided, she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. She would handle this her way. Dominic settled into the seat across from her as if he belonged there. His confidence was maddening, his smirk infuriating. The crew continued their duties, pretending not to notice the icy tension crackling through. The cabin, the jet doors closed, the engines surged. They were airborne. Amelia stared out the window, her mind racing. This wasn't a coincidence. Dominic had a reason for being here. A move in a game only he seemed to be playing. She needed to know what it was, but more importantly, she needed to make sure he didn't win. What Amelia didn't realize was that this was just the beginning. That by letting him stay on her jet, even for a moment, she had opened the door to something far bigger, darker, and more dangerous than she imagined. Up here, above the clouds, far from the ground where rules still applied, a storm was brewing. And by the time they landed, nothing would ever be the same. The ascent felt heavier than usual, as though the jet itself sensed the weight of what had just happened. Amelia sat motionless, her gaze fixed on the clouds drifting past the oval windows. The hum of the engines was steady, but inside her, a storm churned. Dominic Steele had infiltrated her sanctuary, a space she guarded more fiercely than any boardroom. And now, there he was, lounging across from her like a king in his stolen throne. He leaned back, crossing one leg over the other, his presence radiating smug confidence. It wasn't just arrogance, it was control, his favorite game. Amelia didn't need words to read his intentions. This wasn't about convenience, nor was it about an urgent discussion. This was a calculated move, a challenge, an invasion designed to provoke. She took a slow breath, her manicured fingers tracing the rim of the crystal glass before her. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. Not here. Not ever. Outside, the world stretched in endless shades of white and blue. Inside, tension thickened with every passing minute. The flight attendants moved quietly, their smiles tight, their eyes darting nervously between Amelia and Dominic. They felt it too, the clash of titans simmering in the confined luxury of 40,000 feet. Amelia's mind raced. What did he want? Why here? Why now? The timing couldn't have been accidental. The Geneva summit was hours away, a battleground where alliances would be forged, deals sealed, and power lines redrawn. She had been preparing for this moment for months, positioning Skylux Elite as the unrivaled leader in luxury aviation. A single slip could cost her everything. And Dominic knew it. She stole a glance at him. He was scrolling through his phone, utterly relaxed, as though he owned the clouds outside. The audacity made her jaw tighten. Amelia had built her empire on precision, on flawless execution. Chaos was her enemy. Yet here sat the embodiment of chaos, sipping champagne on her jet. The flight attendant served lunch, a spread of delicacies curated for Amelia's refined taste. She barely touched hers, her appetite smothered by the tension. Dominic, on the other hand, savored every bite with deliberate slowness, like a man in no hurry, like a predator enjoying the silence before the strike. Hours stretched. Conversation was minimal, limited to polite nods and curt acknowledgements. But beneath the stillness, a silent war raged. Amelia could feel his eyes on her, studying her reactions, searching for cracks in her composure. He thrived on discomfort, on pushing boundaries until they snapped. She excused herself, retreating to the private suite at the rear of the jet. The door clicked shut, but it didn't shut out the unease clawing at her chest. She paced the plush carpet, her heels sinking into its softness. She needed clarity. She needed control. She grabbed her phone, firing off a series of messages to her assistant, demanding answers. The replies were frantic apologies. Dominic had called directly, bypassing. Standard protocol, claiming a matter of mutual benefit that couldn't wait. He had convinced the assistant that this was urgent, a collaboration opportunity that would position Skylux Elite as the exclusive partner for Titan Corp executives. The assistant, eager to please, had cleared him without hesitation. Amelia's lips curved in a bitter smile. Dominic hadn't just boarded her plane. He had orchestrated a spectacle. This wasn't business. It was a statement. He was telling her that her rules meant nothing, that he could infiltrate her world whenever he pleased. She returned to the cabin, her expression serene, masking the storm inside. Dominic looked up, meeting her gaze with that same infuriating smirk. It was a game to him. Every second, every glance, every measured pause was another move on his chessboard. The hours dragged on, thick with unspoken hostility. Amelia busied herself with documents, though her eyes skimmed the pages without seeing. Dominic occasionally made a comment, light, casual, but laced with meaning. Each word was a probe, testing her defenses. Then came the turbulence, not from the skies, but from the man sitting across from her. It began subtly. A remark about her latest contract with an international airline. A question about her acquisition of a smaller competitor. His tone was casual, but his knowledge was surgical. He wasn't fishing. He already knew. He was flaunting it. Amelia realized with a jolt he had access to information that was supposed to be airtight, confidential. Her pulse quickened. How deep had he dug? How many of her walls had he scaled? Impressive move, he said softly, almost to himself, though the words sliced through the quiet like a blade. Amelia's hand stilled. Over the papers. She didn't look up, but every nerve was on edge. This wasn't just arrogance. It was a declaration. He was inside her world in ways she couldn't yet measure. Minutes bled into hours. The cabin, once her sanctuary, felt like a cage closing in. And Dominic was the lion, circling, patient, relentless. Amelia's thoughts tangled, every instinct screamed to regain control, to end this farce. But how? A confrontation mid-air would only feed his narrative. A display of anger would give him the victory he craved. No, she needed to outplay him, to turn this humiliation into his undoing. Then it happened. the moment that would shatter the fragile calm and set the internet ablaze. It started with an insult. Subtle, yet sharp enough to cut through her composure. He made a remark, not about business, but personal, about her rise to power, about how women like her didn't build empires without bending certain rules. The implication was venomous, deliberate. Her blood boiled. Years of battles, of proving herself, of clawing her way to respect, all reduced to a cheap insinuation. The room seemed to tilt, the hum of the engines drowning under the roar in her ears. She rose slowly, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Dominic's eyes gleamed with something dark, something hungry. He wanted this. He wanted the reaction, and he got it. The slap cracked through the cabin like a gunshot. His head snapped to the side, the smirk wiped clean. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. The crew froze. The champagne flutes trembled in their holders. Amelia's hand burned, but her spine was steel. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her palm had said everything. Dominic turned back slowly, his jaw tightening, his eyes colder than the skies outside. And then he smiled. A slow, chilling curve of his lips that sent a shiver down her spine. It wasn't over. It had just begun. The rest of the flight was silence, thick, suffocating, electric, with unspoken threats. Amelia stared out the window, her reflection fractured, in the glass. She had drawn blood, yes, but at what cost? Dominic Steele wasn't a man who forgave. He was a man who calculated, who retaliated with precision. And Amelia knew, with a sinking certainty, that the price of that slap would be steep. As the jet descended toward Geneva, the city lights glittered like shards of glass in the distance. Amelia sat composed, her expression unreadable, but inside, dread coiled like smoke. She had won the moment. But the war, the real war, was waiting on the ground, and Dominic Steele never lost. The Geneva skyline glittered beneath a flawless blue sky, a city poised for power plays and whispered deals. For Amelia Grant, it was supposed to be a triumph, another, staged to showcase her dominance in an industry where few women had even cracked the glass. Instead, it loomed like a battlefield drenched in shadows. She descended the jet steps with poise carved from stone, cameras flashing from a distance as luxury car convoys lined the tarmac. Dominic Steele followed at a leisurely pace, his presence magnetic, his silence deafening. No one watching would guess what had transpired in the air. No one except Amelia, whose every breath felt like balancing on a knife's edge. Inside the VIP terminal, her team waited, their smiles bright, their questions unspoken. Amelia brushed past them, her heels striking the marble floor in a rhythm that screamed control, even as her mind pulsed with unease. Dominic didn't try to speak. He didn't need to. His game was in motion, and Amelia sensed it with every beat of her heart. The summit venue, a grand hall carved in gold and glass, was a hive of wealth and ambition. Titans of industry mingled beneath glittering chandeliers, their laughter polished, their words sharpened like blades. Amelia walked through the crowd like a queen through courtiers, chin high, every gesture a performance of power. But inside, dread whispered, "What is he planning? When will he strike?" She didn't have to wait long. It began with murmurs, soft, slithering currents that curled through the hall. Heads turned subtly, eyes flicked toward her, then away, like dancers in a silent choreography. Amelia felt it before she saw it. The shift in the air, the weight of unseen judgment pressing against her skin. And then she saw the screen. The massive LED display at the far end of the hall, meant to showcase highlights of the summit, flickered. The crowd's attention pivoted. Amelia's breath hitched, her face filled the screen, crystal clear, larger than life, her hand mid-air striking Dominic across the cheek. The slap, explosive, brutal in its clarity, echoed through the speakers. in sickening surround sound. Gasps rippled through the crowd like shock waves. It wasn't just the slap. The footage rolled in merciless slow motion, capturing every detail, the fury blazing in her eyes, the way Dominic's head snapped to the side, the stunned stillness of the crew. And then the worst part? The smile. That slow, serpentine smile curling Dominic's lips as he turned back to face her. The hall erupted, not in applause, not in laughter, but in a deafening symphony of whispers and phones clicking to life. Screens lit up like stars as attendees filmed, tweeted, posted. Within seconds, the clip was everywhere. Hashtags blooming like wildfire, headlines writing themselves in real time. Amelia stood frozen, the blood roaring in her ears. Her empire, the brand she had built on elegance, discretion, and control, was unraveling in front of her like a cheap thread. Dominic stepped into the light, calm, collected, a mask of wounded. Dignity stretched over steel. He didn't look at her as he addressed the crowd, his voice smooth as glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, pausing just enough to let the silence bloom. "I came here today to discuss partnerships, innovation, the future of luxury travel," but his tone dipped, rich with rehearsed regret. "I didn't expect that future to include physical assault at 40,000 feet. The hall vibrated with collective shock. Cameras swung to Amelia, hungry for her reaction. Her throat tightened. Every instinct screamed to fight back, to claw her way, out of the quicksand tightening around her. But she couldn't move, couldn't speak. Dominic was controlling the narrative, and she was choking on the weight of it. He continued, weaving his words like silk around a blade. He spoke of professionalism, of respect, of unprovoked aggression. He never raised his voice, never lost that mask of quiet righteousness. By the time he finished, he wasn't just the victim, he was the hero. The man who endured humiliation with grace. The applause was hesitant at first, then swelling. It was the sound of judgment disguised as sympathy, a verdict delivered in claps and murmurs. Amelia felt the ground tilt beneath her. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, calls from PR, messages from her board, alerts from media outlets ravenous for a statement. She ignored them all. Her pulse thundered as Dominic approached, his smile carved from ice. He leaned just close enough for only her to hear, his breath grazing her ear. "Game over," he whispered, and walked away, leaving her in the ruins of her composure. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Amelia's survival instincts roared to life, drowning the panic with raw, blazing clarity. She had two choices: crumble under the weight of scandal or weaponize it before it crushed her. And Amelia Grant didn't crumble. Her mind raced, dissecting the battlefield. The footage was damning, yes, but it also told a story she could rewrite if she moved fast enough. Dominic had played his hand, broadcasting her fury to the world. But he had underestimated one thing: Amelia's ability to turn fire into fuel. As the summit spiraled into chaos around her, Amelia pivoted on her heel and strode out of the hall, ignoring the cameras, the questions, the flashes that burned like acid. She needed silence, space, a war room to plan her counterstrike. Because this wasn't just revenge anymore. This was survival. The Geneva night sky shimmered like molten silver as Amelia's limousine sliced through the streets. Inside, silence roared louder than traffic. Her phone lay face down on the seat, vibrating endlessly. Missed calls, headlines, trending hashtags, board members demanding answers. The world was watching, dissecting her downfall in real time. But Amelia Grant wasn't finished. She had built her empire from rubble, clawed her way through storms that would have drowned lesser souls. A scandal, no matter how viral, wouldn't bury her. Not if she turned the narrative into a weapon sharp enough to cut Dominic's steel to pieces. By the time the car slid into the underground entrance of her penthouse suite at the Royal Crescent Hotel, Amelia had shed every fragment of shock. She was steel now, cold, polished, lethal. Inside, her war room came alive. Screens glowed with news feeds, social media chatter, live coverage of the summit still buzzing with her name. Slapgate dominated global trends. Analysts speculated on her resignation. Rivals salivated over Skylux Elite's potential collapse. Investors panicked, and Dominic? He was everywhere. His face plastered across every channel, his statements crafted to perfection. Violence is never the answer. I only hope we can move forward with grace. The audacity was staggering. He had played the victim so well, the world had crowned him a saint. Amelia paced the room, her mind a storm of strategies. Her PR team called incessantly, urging apologies, damage control, a groveling interview to salvage scraps of reputation. She ignored them all. Groveling wasn't in her blood. Retaliation was. She poured herself a drink, neat, amber fire sliding down her throat, and began her plan. The footage was Dominic's weapon. Fine. She would turn it into his noose. Because while the world had seen the slap, they hadn't seen what led to it. Not yet. Amelia's jets were floating fortresses of luxury, but they were also fortresses of technology. Every cabin, every suite, every whisper, recorded, for safety, for discretion, for moments exactly like this. She pulled up the encrypted files, fingers flying across the keyboard. There it was, the full recording of Flight 827, from takeoff to landing. Hours of footage capturing Dominic Steele in all his arrogance, all his venom, all his whispered provocations, and the crown jewel, his words, the ones dipped in poison, laced with misogyny, designed to slice through her pride. Women like you don't build empires without spreading their legs. Amelia replayed it, once, twice, letting the ugliness soak into her veins until fury crystallized into focus. The world hadn't seen this Dominic, the predator behind the polished mask. They would now. Her plan unfolded with surgical precision. Not through press conferences or desperate statements, but through exposure, timed like a symphony. The recording would leak anonymously to top-tier journalists, the ones who devoured hypocrisy for breakfast. The full context: Dominic's manipulation, his verbal assault, his calculated humiliation. And then, the slap. Not as a tantrum, but as a breaking point after relentless provocation. Amelia didn't stop there. She unearthed more: emails, transactions, buried scandals Dominic had scrubbed from his empire's walls. Deals soaked in blood money, NDAs silencing victims, partnerships greased with bribes. She packaged it all into a dossier so damning it could incinerate Titan Corp's facade. And then she waited. Not long. By morning, the internet convulsed with a new storm. Headlines flipped like traitors. Leaked audio reveals Dominic Steele's sexist tirade at 40,000 feet. From victim to villain, the truth behind Dean Slapgate. Titan Corp CEO faces calls for resignation after scandal. Clips of his vile remarks flooded every feed, every platform. The same voices that had crowned him a saint now bayed for his blood. Sponsors pulled out, stocks plummeted, feminist groups declared war. Hashtags turned against him. Steele exposed, Juk respect. Women. Justice for Amelia. And Amelia. She rose like a phoenix from ashes Dominic had tried to bury her in. Interviews flooded in, not to shame her, but to celebrate her courage in standing up to a corporate tyrant. Her PR team spun the narrative into gold. Amelia Grant, the woman who wouldn't bow, the CEO who slapped sexism in its smug face. She became a symbol, a movement. Skylux Elite bookings soared as women worldwide rallied to her side. What was meant to destroy her had reforged her into something bigger than power, influence. Dominic vanished from public view within 72 hours. Titan Corp announced an indefinite leave of absence for their CEO, a polished phrase, for exile. Investors fled. Rivals circled like vultures. The man who once ruled the tech kingdom now hid behind blackout curtains, his empire crumbling under the weight of his own arrogance. But Amelia wasn't done. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling, windows of her Geneva suite days later, the city sprawling beneath her like a conquered map. The media frenzy had slowed, settling into admiration. Her name wasn't just trending, it was etched into history. Her assistant entered quietly, eyes wide with awe, holding a single envelope. "From Mr. Steele," she whispered, almost fearful. Amelia opened it with steady hands. Inside, a single sheet of paper. No threats, no apologies. Just 5 words, scrawled in jagged ink. "You win." For now. She smiled, a cold, beautiful curve that held no fear. Let him plot. Let him simmer in exile. Because Amelia Grant had learned long ago, power wasn't about avoiding storms. It was about becoming the storm. She turned back to the city, her reflection gleaming against the glass like a blade. The world had watched her fall and rise again, fiercer than before. And somewhere, Dominic Steele nursed his wounds, knowing one truth that burned hotter than his humiliation. You don't start a war with a woman who owns the sky, not unless you're ready to crash.